Welcome to episode number 33 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast, recorded August 16th, 2019. My name's Eric. I'm the host of the show. I'm based in Southern Ontario. I'm a hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, VE3 EPN, and computer geek. I got into preparedness when I was working frontline emergency services and witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events such as ice storms, power outages, etc. I started a small preparedness company to help people get prepared and be able to look after themselves for at least 72 hours, if not longer.
My name is Ian, and I live on a small hobby farm in BC. I'm an outdoor enthusiast, sport shooter, reloader, field officer for the CCFR, and my farm's designated handyman. Now this is where Alan comes in.
I think we lost Alan.
Uh-oh.
Alan. Uh-oh. All right. Well, trying to help support the show and keep the Canadian Prepper Podcast on the air, maybe get Alan back. You can buy a Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt at rapidsurvival.com. All the proceeds help keep the lights on and the backup generator fueled.
If you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Canadian Prepper Podcast and submit a review on iTunes. Also, we want your feedback, good or bad. Let us know if there's a topic you want us to cover or if you like or dislike something we're doing. Email feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Go easy on me, I'm a very gentle soul.
And Alan's back.
As I was saying, I'm your technologically impaired
safety nerd.
I'm a local first responder. I teach first aid, coach my friends and family to be better prepared. I'm a locksmith by trade. I've worked in the physical security industry for a little more than 20 years now.
Awesome. So we've got some red hot content for you in this episode. We're going to start off with some news articles relating to preparedness in the outdoors. Next, we'll be letting you know how we've improved our preparedness since the last episode. Then we're going to get into the main topic for this episode, wildfire preparedness. We'll move into some news.
Local news, for me anyways, there was an explosion in London, destroyed 7 homes according to this article. We're now up to about 10. An impaired driver driving the wrong way down a one-way street crashed into a house, severed a gas line, and that resulted in an explosion that set several houses on fire, sent 7 to hospital, 6 of whom have now been released. But I would take the good with the bad that although 10 homes have been destroyed, no one was killed and no one was critically injured. The driver was taken into custody, is facing a number of impaired driving charges. And this is, if nothing else, this is kind of the emergencies that I like to prepare for, because this is the real stuff. This is, somebody's going to be displaced for a couple of days because of a local emergency. There were 200 people in that neighborhood that were homeless for a night. They had to be evacuated.
Well, it's kind of a black swan thing out of the blue too, right? It's not like you can sit there and have a news notice that it's coming your way. It's,
exactly.
Literally had 5 seconds notice that your house is about to be engulfed in flames. So it's
that was it. Like the good news, because this was about 11 o'clock at night, so just about everybody in the neighborhood was home. People heard the commotion after the crash. They heard the sirens show up, but fire department was on scene before the fire started.
Oh wow!
To do extrication because of the car, and then after through that, because there was a gas leak. That's what caused the explosion, further into the incident. So there's nobody in the homes. Wow. And it was. It could have been significantly worse. So that was. That's kind of been the big news around London the last couple of days. Where I work in my day job is actually about 6 blocks from where that happened, and I'll tell you, it was an interesting commute into work.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
Yeah, no, for sure. That'd be really neat, actually. As far as
actually, the CBC had a helicopter cover circling the area for most of the day. That was Wednesday that it had, Tuesday night, Wednesday night into Thursday that it happened. So Thursday they had the helicopter circling. The news article shows some of the carnage, but there were 7 homes just completely flattened, and then a few more have had to be taken down since. So.
Wow. Well, yeah, it's neat for when you think about the after action report there to see if it was more of a explosion per se, or just a fire that got fed continuous fuel, or what. But it sounds like it actually exploded for real.
It was an actual explosion. There's video of the roof lifting off and then hitting the ground.
Oh, okay.
It was a full on explosion.
Oh wow. That's well, as long as everybody got out okay, that's the important part.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep, there was four of the injuries were firefighters. One was overnight. Everybody else had been released. There were a couple of police officers injured, and one or two citizens.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I got a couple stories on wildlife interactions. First one I put in the actual show notes was a man stops a wolf attack in Banff, which was not something you hear about too often. When I lived up north, I saw one guy end up getting killed by wolves, but it's not a very common thing as much as the movies would make it out to be. So the one guy, even though he's a grown-up adult, he was getting pulled out of the tent by the wolf, and somebody else came to his rescue and kind of beat the wolf down a bit in order to change his mind on it. But yeah, animal gets desperate enough and hungry enough, they'll try anything, right?
They will.
Oh yeah.
So on a personal note, my oldest daughter actually was out walking the dogs on my usual walk, but I was away at work, and she ran into not one but two cougars. So yeah, interestingly enough, the reason she didn't get hurt is because Mom was trying to teach the baby cougar how to hunt, and baby cougar didn't know what to do because it ran into two dogs and a human, and they don't like to have their ambush spoiled. So when the two dogs were going ballistic on the baby cougar, and my daughter had eyes on the mom cougar, they both backed away. So it was very fortunate on her end. But yeah, so it can happen anywhere, anytime. So that was just last week. The conservation officer was actually quite enthralled to hear the story. So
Well, there we go. That's
Yeah, good thing you have the dogs.
yeah,
walk
and
softly,
actually,
carry a big dog.
yeah, well, that's interesting enough too. Is if you have one dog with you, the cougar will attack the dog. If you have two dogs with you, the cougar will back away because they do not like to be outflanked or outnumbered.
Ah,
So if
interesting.
you're gonna walk
So
in,
two is one, one is none.
two is one, one is none. So and it didn't have to come down to my daughter fighting off the cougar either, which was good. So and I guess the baby cougar wasn't very big at all; it was fairly small. So, anyways, moving along, the other one I wanted to mention too was Hong Kong Airport shut down for the second day. This news article is a little bit old in the fact that things have progressed for the worse actually in the last little while, but they had some protests going on in the Hong Kong area, and they decided to storm the airport and decide to make camp in there. So the reason I brought this up is because, of course, people that are, planning to travel out on a certain day have their plans thrown in the toilet, and the vast majority of people are traveling by air nowadays. So it doesn't take much to shut down what is basically one of the biggest airports in the world. Just a few people protesting. So
Yeah.
well, few is probably a bit understated, but I'm saying that it doesn't take much to shut down. Yeah, to shut down the transportation infrastructure does not take much.
No.
No, I mean you could do it really effectively with just a couple of people, right? It's those pinch points that we keep hitting on. Like that's a major pinch point, and within the building, you can shut that down at 4 or 5 security checkpoints, and then there's just no getting past it.
Yeah.
Yep. That's it. You just sit and wait.
Yep.
So you guys sitting down for this news article?
Yeah.
Everybody's sitting down. Everybody's ready for this.
I don't get paid enough to stand.
So I found a news article here. Police chiefs say handgun ban won't stop flow of weapons into Canada.
Get out of here.
Whoa.
You don't say. I am shocked to hear this.
Yeah. So some common sense is coming out here. It's a CBC article, and it just touches on the fact that the chiefs of police are starting to say that the handgun ban is not going to stop the bad guys from getting guns. Shocker, I know.
Wow.
Because criminals don't follow laws.
Yeah.
Weird. But it's actually nice. We were talking about this before the show too. Is that when you get above a certain level in the police services, it's very political, and so it doesn't take much for these people to bend to what seems to be the popular opinion at the time, which is usually based on emotion, not facts.
Yep.
So it's nice to see that these guys actually decided to stick with facts and reason versus going with what's the easy way to do, which is hopefully secure their re-election as a chief or reappointment, should I say, and go with what the current government is pushing for.
And there's one little spot here that I liked in the article. It says a majority of cases involving gun violence, the handguns being used are already illegal, and it makes no sense to ban something that's already prohibited. Common sense.
Again, I'm blown away to hear that put in print by the CBC. I'm genuinely shocked that they ran that.
Yeah, happy to see it.
Good on them. I mean, credit where due, right? Good on them to publish that, even though it's very much not the narrative that they follow. But that's something that's already illegal, making it more illegal is, it's turning the hose on somebody when they're already wet from the rain. It just doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Doubly illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
We'll make it super illegal.
That's right. That'll show them. Yeah, actually interesting. Tim Gilby on the YouTube points out the fact that currently the airports, I'm assuming in Canada, are all jammed due to U.S. customs computers being crashed. So if you, again, transportation infrastructure is pretty delicate at the best of times. So if all of a sudden a good chunk of people can't cross the border, that's a problem.
Oh, yeah.
What was that Steven Seagal movie where he refused to fly and he would only take the train places? I forget what movie it was.
I'm just thinking of the A-Team with B.A. Baracus again. I mentioned him last time, but I ain't getting on no plane.
I ain't getting on no plane, fool. Yeah, no, that's like the third A-Team or A-Team comparison I've had this week. Somebody else said something, and I was like, I do love it when a plan comes together. And I was smoking a cigar at the time, so that worked. That worked.
There you go.
Well timed.
Yeah. So that's. Anyways, I think that's my cue to rewatch the A-Team and wish I had somebody like B.A. Baracus in my mag.
Yeah, I think we gotta do it.
Now try and get that theme song out of your head for the next 2 hours.
Hey, let's move into what we've done lately for our preps.
And what we've done lately for our preps is brought to you by Get Out, Stay Out Canada. They're the creators of the Get Out, Stay Out Campfire Grill and can be found at getoutstayout.ca. Really looking forward to reviewing that one, just for the record.
I just got stock of them in here, so I'm going to be checking them out shortly. But the box is very heavy, so I'm thinking they're going to be good quality.
Wonderful. Excellent. Love to hear that.
Yeah. So for myself, as far as what I've done lately is I've been gone to the States for the week. So I took time to learn the area. It's an area that I haven't been to before. So it took some time to get to know the area. Actually did it. There's these little scooters they had you can rent on Uber. So I hopped on one of those little scooters and just zipped around the block and around the hotel and learned the area. And then did the typical recon of the hotel, like we've talked about in previous episodes. Found some multiple exits to get in and out of the place. Didn't have much of a choice as to where my room was going to be, as I was there for a big conference. So it was just throw you in a room and away you go. So I was on the 12th floor. Place is booked. So I just took some time to learn my way around and count the doors to the exits and figure out some different ways to get out of the place beyond the main entrances and exits that they want you to stampede towards.
Excellent. Yeah. And nothing bad happened?
Nothing bad happened, which is good.
That's how we like it.
It's Texas. Nothing bad's going to happen.
No,
we're well prepared for it. So.
Exactly. I mean, except for the odd hurricane or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't worry about that. It's not coming in the main entrance of the hotel. We're fine.
Yeah. As for myself, got to be an internet celebrity this week. I got to meet up with the Prepper podcast panelist Hughes, so that was kind of cool. It's always neat to meet up with like-minded people. It's even better when it's somebody you've worked with but never actually met in person. Yeah. Got to spend some time at the range. That was always nice. Got to try out that new Vortex Optics scope I mentioned a little while ago on I think 2 podcasts ago. And arranged to meet up with yet another like-minded person here to discuss some various skill sets. He's interested in getting into reloading, and he's a local guy, so that'll be happening tomorrow. Only had a few days at home really in the last couple weeks, so I've just been busy maintaining the farm. Been picking blackberries every time I have a chance. When my daughter's not walking the dogs, I try and get out there, and we get about 5 pounds a day when we're on the walks. Big wild Himalayans behind our house. They're just massive stands of berry bushes, which is kind of cool. Processed 2 more birds for the freezer. One, his name was Richard because he was a bit of a dick. And so we took care of Richard, and was
that the big black Richard?
No. That was actually, he was a multicolored one, but he was so bad. He'd walk by his cage and he'd be thrashing to get at you. We never let him out in the farm because he would chase around everybody, dogs, other chickens, kids. Oh. So we put him in the show just to see if he actually qualified for the breed standard, and they said no, he's a bit of a loser. So we're like, agreed.
Agreed. Bang.
And my daughters, of course, since they've joined the poultry local poultry 4-H farm club, they've become like merciless eugenicists. So basically, as soon as that bird didn't make the cut, he's like, he's going down, Dad. I'm like, okay. So it was. So Richard got taken care of, and then one of the other guys, he was actually unnamed because we knew his ultimate fate. So we just waited for there to be cause to do more than one at a time. So we took care of those two guys. And so we had a very successful 4-H farm show. So the daughters did really well. And the nice thing is, by having a couple of rewards or awards behind the birds, you can get a better premium for hatching eggs for them, and which translates for more cash for preps.
Wonderful.
And that's about it. But busy enough.
Nice.
That is busy enough. This week I'm getting set up to teach a stop the bleed class. So I built a couple of props. One is for a gash, like a gushing wound prop, and a severed limb, so we can practice some of that with the students. Gearing up for another weekend of school. I'm now on the hunt for a new EDC flashlight. My other one finally died on me about 5 years after being in my pocket every single day and going through the washing machine more than once. And it was a great little light, but it's kicked the bucket. So I'll put that out to the listener base. If you've got something small, and I mean it was this big, and for scale that's about the size of my thumb, right, about 2 inches long, maybe an inch around. That one ran on 3 little LR44 button cell batteries, which was really neat, really handy. So show me what you got. I'm looking for something smaller than a AAA and bigger than the little keychain thing. So show me what you got, and I'm interested in replacing that. And then began the recruitment process for the county's community emergency response volunteer team, which is the team that sets up shelters and rehabilitation and such when disaster strikes. This particular the London unit of the CERV was actually involved in the recovery after that explosion. So that's one of the things that they do. They help set up shelters and such for people who are displaced, and then help with the long-term recovery. So my better half and I have decided that we're going to get involved in that. So that's something that's coming up kind of end of October, beginning of November. We'll start training for that. So that's
Nice.
it's kind of what's new in our world.
Awesome.
Is it much of a process to go through all that, or is it like?
It's to actually become part of the team. It's mostly just a background check and pass a first aid class, and be fit for a respirator. So I'm pretty good on that part. The rest of the training, a lot of it has to do with the mindset of being prepared to be self-sufficient for 72 hours. Actually, the pamphlet was really informative about why it's important to be prepared for 3 days or more, so that in the event of a disaster, first responders can deal with actual emergencies and not your stupid ass because you forgot to go grocery shopping yesterday. So that's kind of where their head is in terms of preventing problems. So I think that's I'm on board with that idea by sitting here right now. So we'll find out a little bit more as the fall goes on, and see where it takes us.
Yeah, I've got a suggestion here, Alan, in the chat here for from Transport Canada Guru. Says Olight S1R2 baton flashlight.
Olight S1R2. I'm gonna write that down.
Small and lightweight. So that's in the.
I've actually seen that very flashlight he's talking about. It's actually pretty cool. The rechargeable magnetic cable thing, it basically hooks onto the back, and it's basically almost it's about the size of your thumb, and they're not cheap, but man, are they ever useful? Like I've seen them in action. Okay. They are a fantastic little flashlight.
Well, I will certainly look into that. Thank you for the suggestion.
All right. Well, shall we move into the main topic?
I think we should.
All right, so basic preparedness item for wildfire preparedness. I guess we start off with our talking points here, but insurance coverage. I mean, no matter how unprepared you are, this is one of those things that's kind of a hands-off thing, but as a general rule, you'll just have to double check, but your house insurance should cover, getting damaged by wildfire, whether it be the whole house or an outbuilding or whatever. So I think as a very basic preparedness item, let's talk about maybe calling your insurance provider, just seeing what you're covered for. Some insurance might cover just replacement of lost, buildings or items, but other ones might even go as far as preparing or providing hotels for you, requiring you to pay extra for special riders if you have like 5,000 guns in your basement. Maybe you should mention that. They might have to charge you extra in case you lose it all in a fire, because they always look for excuses not to pay, so there's no sense giving them one.
Yeah, it's a good point. Not many people even are aware of what they have for insurance. They just sign the line and pay the monthly fee and assume everything's covered.
Yep.
Maybe not.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not as tactical as some of the other stuff we could talk about, but I mean, yeah, it's just for the sake of a simple phone call, you might as well at least be 100% sure what you're covered for. When I was actually, we had a fire on the far side of the ridge behind the house here, a place, well, I guess near Port Alberta, and it's a big resort lake they had, and a bunch of houses were going up and stuff, and we had that scene from Schindler's List when a bunch of ashes coming down in your vehicle, and you think it's kind of snow, and you kind of like, oh, and yeah, so I walked outside of the house in the middle of July about 3 years ago, and I saw a bunch of what I thought was snow coming down, and I was all confused for a minute, and yeah, it was ash coming down. So the first thing I did actually, before I even started thinking about collecting stuff up, I actually phoned the insurance company. I was like, so if this stuff actually catches our house on fire, what are we good for? And he actually said, well, unless you take a flaming stick and throw it inside your house to start it on fire, you're covered. So I was like, noted.
All right. So as long as the fire starts on the outside, you're set.
Yeah, he says just don't burn down your house and you'll be fine. And so it was just nice peace of mind, so we could kind of like slow down. We were like thinking that we're gonna lose absolutely everything. We just took a quick video of what we wanted to keep. That was number one, because you got to prove ownership no matter what. We'll talk about that later, but it simplifies things a lot when you know what you're covered for and what you're not covered for.
Mm-hmm.
So, another thing I wanted to mention here: choice of external house material. I mean, we don't always have that choice, but if you're building a house, or if you're remodeling a house or changing stuff out, one of the things I hate about this house that we're in right now is it has shingles and wood siding. It's horrible. From a fire preparedness item, I'd rather have like a steel roof and maybe stucco or a rock wall instead. I mean, that would certainly be a little more fire resistant. I won't say fireproof.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Nothing's truly fireproof, but you can make it so fire resistant that it doesn't matter. One of the things that's come out of the last few fire seasons in like California is that they're starting to build houses where using balloon construction or stick frame construction has been the standard for 50 years. They're starting to build like ICF, like
insulated
precast
concrete. Yeah.
Insulated concrete forms or even just concrete, like precast concrete houses, because it doesn't matter what's on the outside. Like the veneer doesn't matter. You can, the wood siding can burn off, but then the structure inside is still safe.
Well, the best part about that ICF is it's way more energy efficient too. So I mean, the greenies would be happy. I mean, you're gonna have lower power bills to begin with, and a little more fire resistance, right?
So yeah, it's if you're building new, definitely, especially if you're in a wildfire zone, definitely look into the ICF option. It's a little bit definitely more to build. It costs more to build, but when you look at the reduced insurance rates and the reduced loss rate and the reduced energy consumption and all that stuff, you'll probably end up ahead at the end.
Yeah. So and another thing I want to mention is, if you're in wildfire season, I mean, you could probably mitigate a lot of damage just by reporting it right away if you notice a fire before anybody else. So preventing the spread is part of preparedness, and the fact that you might save yourself a whole lot of trouble because it might come back to you. So, for example, our local number, if you want to report wildfires, is *5555 on your cell. Sure, every jurisdiction's got its own local thing, but in BC,
call 911.
That's what it is.
Don't worry about it. Call 911. It's perfectly all right.
And they'll send you in the right direction at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned that as just as a mitigation factor and or preparedness item, is like knowing how to report it to prevent the spread.
Yep.
First thing I really want to mention from a major point was evacuation is not a mission failure. So nothing is worth your life as far as wildfire preparedness goes. But prioritize what you would take. But basically, evacuation is not a bad thing to do. It's better to be out with first mover advantage than to sit around and wait till the very last minute. Number one, we plan ahead on all this. So that includes evac plan for your livestock and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a place with one highway up and down the island, that's a problem.
Yep.
But
if you're a problem.
In a place like Southwest Ontario, well, there's more options, right?
Yep.
More options and less fire.
Yeah, and less fire.
Yep.
So I mentioned it just a couple sentences ago there, but first mover advantage can't be overstated. I mean, I'd much rather be on the highway with less stuff, but ahead of the crowd, than being, fully loaded down with everything I want
Absolutely.
to keep and being stuck in traffic and then overtaken by fire.
It's just stuff, right? Stuff can be replaced, especially if your insurance will cover it. Get out. Just get out. That's why everybody should always have a 72-hour bag ready to go.
Yep.
Each person grabs their bag, throw as much water and food in as you can. Get out.
Yeah, no, I can't agree more. That's for sure. Like, you look at that Fort McMurray fire, and the
Absolutely.
lessons you can learn from that. I mean, as soon as you see the people bogged down in traffic and not going anywhere, and the fire is like encroaching right behind them in the rear view, it's a pretty
Yep.
sad state. Like, if you got yourself to that point,
Yeah.
That's not where you want to be.
No, that's not a place to be stuck in. I remember one of the things I remember reading about from the Fort McMurray fires, a woman asking for help from a loaded car because her car was on empty or something, and her husband's car was a stick shift. He wasn't there, and she couldn't drive it.
Oh.
She didn't have any gas in her car.
That's one of those life skill sets that you should probably knock off your bucket list right off the bat.
Yep, I'll be the first one to say it. I haven't driven a stick since I was 16. I've never sought it out. It's never been part of me, but I hope it's like riding a bike and I could figure it out if I had to. Right, I could go back to when I was 16 in the logging cuts of Northern Ontario and remember how to get it going.
Oh, it's definitely like riding a bike. Like, I mean, I prefer driving a stick shift, but I kind of have to face reality. Like, my oldest one's going to start driving here momentarily, and I'd much rather have teach her on an automatic. There's one less thing to sit there and try and overcomplicate things with. And then once she's competent on that, then maybe if she wants to stick, we can talk about it later.
Yeah, absolutely. Learn to drive in an auto. Practice driving in a standard.
Yeah.
Yep.
But know how to drive both.
But no, absolutely, you should know how to drive both.
Yeah.
And know how to start a diesel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one that people don't think of either. Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, it's kind of funny because if you're up in Fort McMurray, one of the job prerequisites to have is a valid driver's license, show up to work sober, and if you can know how to drive a stick, they'll pretty much train you to drive anything else, whether it be a tractor, grader, whatever. But it's amazing how hard they have finding guys like that. A lot of times, I was talking to a local oil patch guy. He's like, yeah, guys that don't know how to drive sticks or don't have valid driver's license, it's amazing. Because nowadays, I guess people are relying on public transit and everything else, or maybe have a few impaired charges or whatever. But you'd think it's a simple thing, but it's not.
Yep.
Well, I mean, where I lived when I was 20, where I lived was right downtown London. I lived on the 25th floor of a condo and condo building, and my entire world was in 8 blocks. I had no need for a car.
Yeah.
I walked to work. The grocery store was 2 blocks away. My local watering hole was right down the street. I didn't need a car. So I had my driver's license already, but if I didn't, I wouldn't. There would have been no drive. Pardon the pun, for me to get it. There'd been no trigger for it. What I do now?
And Tim Gilby in the live chat's got a good point. Says if you can drive a motorcycle, you can drive a stick shift car.
Yeah,
that's true. That's another one of those licenses that you think about the motorcycle perspective of getting out of Dodge down in between traffic or on the side of the road when everybody else is stuck in traffic. That's another bonus idea right there.
Motorcycles are a great plan. That is something that's on my bucket list, is learning to drive a motorcycle.
Yeah. Another thing I want to mention on this was communications plans. So between the cell phone, texting probably works easier when the lines are getting overloaded than trying to actually work a cell phone itself.
Yep, absolutely.
But this is where the ham radio check can come in.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
For sure. You'll get lots of information even ahead of the game on the ham radio, because the guys are constantly watching for stuff, right? So if something's starting to happen, you're going to hear chatter well before it gets to your area.
And maybe not so much ham, but even having the GMRS radios between vehicles. If you're evacuating in a convoy, it'd be nice to talk back and forth in the cars without having to rely on the cell phone network. That it will probably be overloaded during an emergency.
Oh yeah, absolutely will be. We've seen that time and time again.
Yeah, which doesn't take long at all to happen.
No.
Shocking.
No, it sure
short. Interestingly enough, somebody brought up this. There's actually on the preparedness. Oh, what was the guy's name out of the States there? Anyways, he runs one of those long running podcasts there. Anyways, I'll spit out his name in 5 minutes here. But he was mentioning having an out of province or out of state third party person that you can actually send messages to, because as a general rule, if the local lines are tied up, you can generally get a hold of somebody on long distance.
Yep.
So if your better half loses their cell phone in a puddle, or you lose contact with them and you can't get hold of them locally, maybe phone Aunt Sally next province over, leave a message and say, hey, if she happens to phone, here's where I am.
Yep.
And
that's a really good plan.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that's kind of outside the box thinking, but it does kind of work. And
Jack Spirko.
Jack Spirko, thank you.
You're welcome. Great podcast, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I've got so many podcasts on my phone, I'm starting to lose track. But yeah, so the out of province idea, third party, preferably somebody out of province or at least out of the local area. But yeah, something to think about. Rendezvous point.
Somebody's on a different set of towers.
Yeah, rendezvous point for those of us evacuating from a wildfire. If you lose track of the other person in traffic and it's impossible to catch up with them, or they get turned off on an overpass by accident, hey, if things go haywire, we'll meet here, and I'll wait for you until such time as I see you.
Yep. Or until Aunt Sally 2 provinces over can get a message to you. Can get a message to me saying you've ended up somewhere else.
Yeah.
But that's where to go. End up at not Point Bravo is the destination regardless.
Yeah. So of course this is really embarrassing, and I swear to God I wasn't plagiarizing, but I decided to do some Google food to see what other ideas I could come up with, and the BC government has a nice preparedness guide, which pretty much mimicked everything I just said. So I was like, that's actually kind of insulting to me now, because that means I only think as imaginatively as a government drone, so it means I need to actually step up my game a bit.
I am the government.
Or the BC government has actually listened to the people and has responded in kind. I mean, there's, again, credit where due. They may have actually reached out to the locals and figured out what to do.
Maybe
or I like to think that maybe I thought as good as an entire committee of people for the BC government that sat down for 6 weeks and thought about all this. Maybe I just did it just as well as they did. I don't know. But
that could be.
That's also possible.
So in the show notes, I left a book, a PDF that's downloadable off the interwebs, and it's free, so it can't hurt to download it, take a little read. It's only like 20 pages, but it's actually got a couple good tips in there.
Excellent.
Good one to add to your library.
Yeah, so a couple of local things I do here on the farm to take care of the threat of brush fire. So actually, I put the kids to work. I enjoy my child labor when I can get it out of them. So clearing the underbrush. So if there's just like fallen sticks, mainly leaves, whatever that the alpacas haven't eaten up, we try and gather all that up and then make a nice big bonfire at the end of the day. So they give a reward at the end of it, toast our marshmallows, but it also takes away a lot of the fire hazard. If you know, you get one, you probably don't want it to spread and help it, so you might as well get rid of all the underbrush and the combustibles off the ground, right?
Sure.
One thing we used to do on my farm in Alberta when I was growing up, but not so much here, is a controlled burn. So what my dad used to do, we had a lot of grasslands and forests and stuff. He would actually burn the grasslands about every second year, because basically it was horrendous stuff. It would, transfer fire right off the bat. But you'd get like all your neighbors together. There'd be like 40 of you with shovels and hoses and stuff, and basically you just burn the grasslands in between the forest and your house to knock it all down to the point where you could actually mow it again. It would be green in 6 weeks again, but at least there's one way to take care of the excess combustibles, because that's what grew locally, right? It was tall prairie grass. So controlled burn is an option if you have the manpower to control it.
Yeah, the controlled part is the key part of that term.
Don't do it by yourself.
No, and don't lose.
Yeah, we had somebody calling a controlled burn a couple of weeks ago, and there was nothing controlled about it. Like we couldn't see across the road for all the smoke. Like it was rough, and there was nobody around. He said, "It's a controlled burn." Is it controlled by whom? There's nothing here to control it.
The initial ignition was controlled.
I'm sure it was, and I mean everything was in nice little piles, but there was still 70 tons of brush that they were burning, and it was big, and then it was small because we put a lot of water on it, but yeah. So the controlled part is important, right? If you're gonna you burn a section, you put it out right away so it doesn't spread beyond where you want it to go,
and you watch it afterwards.
Yeah,
make sure it doesn't flare up again.
Firewatch is usually 3 hours for every 3 hours.
Yeah,
at
no, you're
least.
good. Yeah, I was going to mention that right away too. Fire breaks is another thing I'm guilty of right now. I'm 3/4 done, but that last quarter is kind of daunting right now. I got one giant tree overlooking the house that I think we have to bring in some professionals for because I don't want to destroy my roof. Although I could get a steel roof afterwards, I suppose.
I was going to say, you got a steel roof coming afterwards.
Yeah.
But then I have to deal with the anger of the rest of the family for the next 6 years, so that'd be no good either. So yeah, fire breaks is a big thing. Depending on your terrain, winds, what's on the ground, fire breaks can be anywhere from 3 to 300 meters. It depends on what works, right? So try and see what works for your local property. But obviously, more is better.
I read somewhere. I think it was a New Zealand wildfire fighting manual I was reading because I've earned the title safety nerd. They were saying that 10 meters is good average.
Yeah, and I mean,
10 meters is like 35 feet for the rest of us. So 10 meters is a good average all the way around of non-combustibles to keep to give the fire a chance to burn out before it actually gets to your property, like to your house.
Yeah, and actually that BC manual breaks it down into zones, and BC from 3 meters all the way out to 300 meters, depending on what you can have and ways to mitigate the spread. So it was pretty good that way. You mentioned the Firewatch. So around here, the big thing is if you're using a chainsaw and you hit a rock or you hit a tree spike from the hippies, leaving one in the tree, or just the hot exhaust pipe of the chainsaw itself. Generally, they want you to be on Firewatch after you use a chainsaw for up to 3 hours, depending on the state of the forest. Because, there might be a spark there that smolders for a while before it actually catches onto something.
I've heard rumor, and I've never followed up to see if the study is accurate or not, but I've heard rumor that grass fires can actually burn underground for months before they actually surface again.
Oh, it's like coal mine fires. I mean, they've had, I think it's in Alberta, and there's another one in Tennessee that's been burning for 20 years.
Yep.
They just been smoldering forever, and they're so large underground they can't put them out, and they don't want to send people down, and they've been having hillsides been burning for 20 years, no problem. So.
Well, I wouldn't say no problem, but it's been burning for 20 years.
Well, it's no problem.
And we consider that normal now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's no problem to keep it going, meaning that way. Like, it's amazing how you would think it would burn off or burn up after a while, but some of these coal seams are huge, right? Depending on where you are. And they just keep going. So, and they were naturally started too. They weren't like some random dude throwing down a cigarette or something either. It was actually a natural start. So,
I've got a comment here in the live chat too from Yup, That's Me. It says lawn mowing produces sparks too. It's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Well, especially around here, you hit a rock. It doesn't take much to do the old flint and steel thing.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, that's a good excuse to not mow your lawn when it's dry.
Yeah.
or I suppose, or you could just do that controlled burn thing. Your neighbors would be thrilled in town, right? No, it's just a controlled burn. It's all good.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's controlled. We're okay.
So yeah, I was going to mention if there is a wildfire kind of approaching and you want to mitigate the spread, one thing to think about is if you have a nice big rainwater storage to draw from if the power goes out, just soaking the crap out of your lawn and roof. I mean, if there's flying ash around and you want to mitigate the start of a local fire on your property, well, if it's wet, it's not going to start burning.
Absolutely.
So, and of course, usually when there's a massive wildfire like Fort McMurray style, the power is going to go out. So if you don't have water stored somehow on your property that you don't mind wasting, meaning like just throwing onto your lawn and roof just to keep everything wet, rainwater storage is an option for collection.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
and,
absolutely.
Have it keep it popped up ahead of time. One of the local guys here has rainwater storage with a solar panel powered water pump and a fire hose.
Oh,
so
cool.
He's well squared away for that. So I was like, okay,
nice.
That's awesome.
That's a nice setup.
I like it.
I remember a building I worked on a few years ago. It was a community center and a library, and it was the town's emergency center. And they buried 5 cisterns, five storage tanks that were connected to the roof drain, so they could collect rainwater. Each one was 10,000 gallons.
Nice.
Wow.
And that was specifically for fire protection.
Nice.
Yeah. So that particular municipality was thinking ahead for that. And it was buried far enough down that it wouldn't freeze, it wouldn't rupture the tanks, but they could fill these tanks with rainwater and then have them ready to go for firefighting if need be.
Well, if you get 15 feet down, you're pretty much going to stay at the mean temperature year round. So that works
exactly.
Well. This I guess is our chance to harp on everybody to make sure they keep their gas tank half full, because if there's a fire bearing down, you don't want to top off before you leave.
No.
Yeah.
Question for you, Alan.
Yes.
As far as if there's a lot of ash, soot in the area, and everything else, N95 masks, are they good enough, or are you gonna need something more?
It's better than nothing. There are N95. So N means non-oil based particulate, and 95 means it's going to filter out 95% of the stuff that comes in contact with it. It's better than nothing, as your notes say. It's not a respirator. If the ash is hot, you want to be really careful of that, because it can. Those masks are paper. So if you're in an area where the ash is hot, then I would suggest not doing that, because you don't want to set your face on fire. That said, when we do auto extrication, where we're potentially setting off sparks, we use N95 masks. Wildfire fighters carry N95 masks. There are a couple of manufacturers out there that have N95 ratings that do not use paper masks. One of them, and there's a fire department, mainland BC. I listen to their podcast. So if you guys are listening, the Volunteer Firefighter podcast, those guys are pretty awesome. Listen to them if you're in emergency services. They've tested and used razor masks, and they're neoprene, and then have a replaceable filter in them, and they've had some excellent success with that in wildfires, in terms of filtering out and keeping people's lungs healthy.
Cool. That's interesting. So a couple things I just mentioned here. The local firefighters, if they get caught in a firefighting blaze and they get surrounded by fire, there is actually a survival blanket for the forest fire aspect. I think it's kind of beyond my price range, and I certainly haven't got one yet, but it's basically a fireproof blanket. So if you get stuck in the bush and you can dig down a bit, throw the blanket over top of you, suffocation might be an issue down the road, or lack of oxygen, but you won't get burned at least as much. So
and those are, that particular one is Nomex and reflective, and it's pretty high end. When I welded, we had welding blankets, and that would keep a lot. It was just cowhide, but it would keep it would keep ash and embers from reaching you if you were wrapped up in it.
Yeah. So it's certainly an option. I think that by that point you've pretty much left yourself painted into a corner. But one thing the guys do wear locally for being around the fire area is the Nomex coveralls. I think you just mentioned Nomex as well. Synthetic fabric that's basically fire. We can't call it fireproof, but it's not easily combustible.
So I learned about Nomex recently, and Nomex does not burn under normal atmospheric conditions. But when you get it in an oxygen-enriched atmosphere over 31%, Nomex is one of the most flammable substances on Earth.
Really?
Oh, good to know.
Because interesting. A couple of my coworkers up north used to wear them from a fire aspect, in case they got, because they're around gasoline quite a bit, and they swore by them. But I don't know if that would actually work around gas.
As long as you don't happen to be standing in a room full of leaking oxygen tanks, you're probably okay.
Huh. All right. Local thing too, if you get stuck in a fire zone and things happen, things start falling apart, logging helmet of any sort would probably help, because even when we're working around here normally, we get branches falling all the time. It's better to have something on your melon than not. If you can't afford the Nomex coveralls or the survival blanket, I was mentioning wool. I think I'd rather be wearing wool than polyester in a fire area.
Absolutely. Wool won't melt to your skin like polyester will.
Yeah, a friend of mine actually was wearing polyester gloves one Halloween and he caught on fire, and because somebody else that had spilled a drink and it caught on fire, and he smacked it with his polyester gloved hands, and his hands were on fire. and then they melt into his hands. So
Ooh,
bad
yeah,
scene
don't do that.
overall.
Yeah,
That's not good.
no.
Yep.
It's not good.
Yeah, it's
No.
it wasn't a
It's
good
not,
scene
that's
at all.
not a good trick for trick or treating.
No,
Yeah,
not at all.
That's not what you want. Yeah.
Yeah, so polyester is a big no-no as far as I'm concerned. As a general rule, I mean, who likes polyester anyway? Go to the surplus store, get your wool.
Yep.
Axes and shovels, no excuse not to have them after our hand tool episode. And from a firefighting perspective, just having a shovel to smack down some fire, especially like grass
Yep.
fires, it's very effective
Yep.
on, or ground fires.
Yep.
Axes, I suppose. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was good. Axes just in case you have to like break something up or get into something, knock down a tree. Multi-use, right?
Mm-hmm. Corn brooms are fabulously effective at knocking down ground fires.
Really?
Cover fires.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Because the corn is naturally rather resistant to fire. Even though it's been dried out, it still has a fairly high moisture content.
yeah, because I would have thought
huh.
it'd be like a little bunch of matchsticks or something.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
No, quite the opposite.
Ah, there you go. I've learned my one thing for the day.
Yeah, better stop now. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had. Alan, you had a bunch too.
Yeah, most of the same as the above. Get ahead of the biggest challenge with the spread of wildfires is wind carrying the embers ahead of the main body of the fire. So if you can get ahead of that, you're okay. If you can't, get in the general rule is if you can't get out, get in the black. So the black is the part that's already been burned. If you can find a break in there or create a break, get into the burned out area. There's no more fuel there. You're safe. You have to create a break to do that, which is why you have axes and shovels and implements of destruction. So do that. Focus your protection plans, your prevention plans on your prevailing winds. So where I live, the wind is almost always from the west to the northwest, or coming from the west or northwest, which means that the back of my house is the highest risk. The back of my house also happens to back onto a 100-acre field, and it can get dry out there. So that could be a challenge. So that's my highest area of risk. And then your last layer of protection is the house itself. Ian mentioned it earlier. Use the non-combustible or the limited combustible materials on the outside. If you can do brick or stucco or concrete, that's best because it's going to take the longest to burn. Wood and vinyl are the fastest to ignite, and your roof, a steel roof, is worth its weight in protection. Pardon me, guys. I'm getting over a bit of a cold. One of the things to understand about fires is that it doesn't, like, the direct flame contact is not necessarily your biggest threat, but radiant heat. So the embers being blown forward will help ignite things, but the radiant heat of a 10,000 degree fire at your back door can actually make things hot enough inside your walls to ignite stuff. So depending on the age of your home, what your insulating material is, and how dry the lumber is that's holding up your house. So the radiant heat can be a problem too. So yeah, keep it away from. Keep as much as you can. Keep that fire as far away from your house as you can. A good sprinkler system will help prevent that from happening in the first place. Be really cognizant of where your fuel sources are, like your gasoline, propane, oil, diesel storage, whatever it is. If you heat your house with propane, maybe consider having that in a place where if it goes up, it's not going to hurt your house. A little bit further from your house, probably a good thing. Keeping your fuel canisters far away from your house so that you can't. So they when they go up, then they're not gonna involve your house, right? A garage or a shed is a whole lot easier and less disruptive to your life to replace than not having a bedroom.
True.
Yep.
And then don't be afraid to soak for a day or two ahead. Again, I was watching a documentary about Cal Fire, which is the firefighting authority in California, and they fight all the wildfires there, and with various methods, and they highlighted a few specific units that were operating. And there was one little town that was threatened, and one guy for 2 days ahead of the fire soaked all of his property all the way around. He just had a couple of garden hoses going. Soaked his entire property for a couple of days beforehand, and everything was gravel and concrete, and there was no lawn, and people made fun of him. And then he soaked everything around it, and then the fire came and went right around his property. Everything else around it burned. His was still standing because it was wet. It took longer to burn up, and the wind was moving, pushing the heat fast enough that it went around his house.
Huh.
So it's a thing. Yeah, even a few hours. Right? Everybody that's been paying attention to our podcast at all for the last 6 months, you should be able to evacuate with everything you need to survive for 3 days in an hour's notice. With a wildfire, you should have at least an hour's notice. So as soon as you hear those alerts, be prepared. Have a bag near the door. Back your car in. Right. Do the simple things so that you're not going to get jammed. Right. Have those printed maps. Plan to take the path of least resistance, not the direction you want to go, and just get out.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I forgot to mention you talking about that too. Is like there is evacuation orders and laws in place pretty much nationwide that you can't, unlike the States with a hurricane, you can't just choose to stay. they'll forcibly extricate you if need be, and it's probably better to leave with what you want rather than just stomp your feet, refuse to leave, and then get thrown in the back of a police car and have everything left behind.
Yeah, leave on your own terms. I mean, you can be right and dead. It's it's something I've told my kids on more than one occasion. Right, look both ways before you cross the street. You may have the right of way. That doesn't matter if you're flat.
Exactly.
The same rule applies. You can be right. You can stand your ground and be right to have stayed and lived your freedom to your last and all of those wonderful things. Or you can recognize the fact that you can't stop the fire on your own, get out, survive, come back and recover. But you can't recover if you're no longer alive. So don't try and be bigger than the fire. You're just not going to do it.
Actually, Tim Gilby on the podcast chat there says borax mixed with water and dunk some coveralls in to make a makeshift fire suit. That's sounds like a neat home remedy. Actually. Give that a try.
I'll let you try that first.
I didn't say I was going to wear the suit and try it.
No, I meant Tim. Tim, you try that first.
Yeah.
There you go. I found a cool new button here too. I can put comments up on the screen.
Oh, what does that say?
Oh,
cool,
look at that.
So there's his comment right there. There we
go.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Baking soda and water has been a long time fire retardant. I can't speak to the efficiency of it, but it's been used for. Actually, we have in one of our stations. We have an old 1929 Model A fire truck, and it has a tank on it of about 100 gallons, and then there's a smaller tank on top of that which held the sodium bicarbonate. And when you arrived at the scene, you mixed the one into the other, and there was an auger, like a hand auger that stirred it up, and then a hand pump that pumped the water out. So that was how they fought fires back in the day. But that, so sodium bicarbonate or the borax, mix it up, and I would rather try that under controlled circumstances and learn for sure, because that sounds to me like one of those old wives' tales.
You know that borax is only found in one place on Earth?
That green box in my grandmother's cupboard?
No, not the finished product. I mean the raw product. Actually, borax itself is actually a very rare material. But it's mined out in one place in California, I believe, and nowhere else.
Huh. Look at that.
Yeah.
That's two things I've learned today.
There you go.
Well, we should probably just shut down the podcast then.
We really should. I think we're done here, guys.
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
Everybody go home. We'll move into the podcast challenge.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't really have anything else to throw in.
All right. So, podcast challenge for this episode is make an itemized list of what you'd want replaced by insurance. Take some photos of the items to prove ownership, or copies of the receipts. Save it to a thumb drive.
I would add to that back up that thumb drive into the cloud somewhere, a Google Drive or a Dropbox or something, so that it exists in more than one place.
Yeah, maybe have another
email
copy of it
email the
else.
list to yourself. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, pictures are worth 1,000 words, right? So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
And like I said, the insurance companies will go to the way to not pay. So if you can prove that you own something.
Yeah, and especially if you can get pictures of the serial numbers. That was
Yeah.
actually something one of the guy that did our home inspection. The appliances were included, and he took pictures of the serial numbers of everything as we were going through, and that was just one of those things I remember. Right? It's one thing to say there was a fridge there. It's quite another thing to say it was this fridge.
Yep.
Yes, yeah, they'll want to replace it with the cheapest one they can find.
Yep.
Absolutely. So if you go through your house and make a list, if you find something that you think maybe not everybody thinks about, or you think of a good spot to maybe stash away a backup copy of the USB thumb drive or a neat little online service that you might want to let other listeners know about, just flip an email to feedback@prepperpodcast.ca and let us know, and we can get that out to everybody else. And it'd be interesting to hear what everybody's kind of plans are.
If it's something that truly can't be replaced, maybe look into having a safety deposit box, because it's safety deposit boxes are usually in basements. They're usually within vaults. Those vaults are usually encased in concrete rooms. They're very well protected, and by extension are insured. So it's an excellent idea to consider that if it's something that truly can't be replaced. I'm sure we'll do an entire episode at some point on safes and vaults for the home, but your fridge and freezer are well insulated. Important documents, not a bad idea to put them in a plastic baggie, toss them in the freezer. A copy of those. The outside may burn, but the inside may in fact stay intact.
Awesome. Let's move into some upcoming events.
All right, I just thought I'd mention the TACCOM is coming up, which is the Tactical and Competitive Shooting Sports Show. It's September 6th to 8th in, Toronto. We talked about that last week, but it is the center of the university. They do have big convention centers there, but I do believe this one's in downtown Toronto. But it is pretty cool. They've got a bunch of vendors showing tactical gear. I don't think there's firearm stuff per se, other than accessories.
There is. I've been following them on Instagram, and there are at least clinics for maintenance and servicing.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's live fire.
Yeah, I don't think there's any.
I can't imagine there would be live fire.
I can't imagine that either.
No, other than on Jane and Finch, but other than
I was going to say it'll be the people that don't have firearms licenses.
Yeah. But our friends from Canadian Patriot Podcast will be there, Gavin and Andrew. They have a booth set up for TACCOM.
Yeah.
So that is something. Yeah, go check them out. See if you can get a selfie with the celebrities that they are. And that's what it is. There's a website in the show notes as well.
Perfect. It's taccomcanada.com.
And you can also follow that same TACCOM Canada on Instagram and Facebook. I'm sure the Twitter as well. They're doing a pretty decent job of getting the word out there. Looks like it's gonna be a fun time.
Awesome. Let's move into some shout outs.
I didn't put anything in here because I haven't met anybody new, so
yeah,
that's it. You're all a bunch of jerks.
Eric, you got any?
I don't have anything this time around either. No.
Okay, so a quick shout out to Hughes. Thanks for the meetup, and just because he didn't show up this week, we're docking his pay.
All right. Oh, we've got another event here from Tim Gilby in the live chat. Friday, September the 6th at the St. Catharines Gun Show. So that's St. Catharines, Ontario. So
well, that's not quite Toronto, so that's good.
No. Yeah. So there you go.
Actually, I am going to be at the gun show in Parksville next month, but I have to nail down the date on that one. But in my role as CCFR field officer, I guess I'll be doing a little booth there as well. So that should be fun. But I'll have to get the details by next week.
Little dog and pony show, yeah.
It will be, yes.
All right. I have been lacking and did not pull up the iTunes reviews. Uh-oh.
Way to go.
Yeah, I know. God.
But we've got a few, so that's good. I mean, we've got a few other ones.
Give me 2 seconds here, and I'll pull it up here. I don't know if someone wants to read the Podbean one while I'm doing that.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot here. I got a Podbean review from Evan. So it says, another great episode. I have a TCCC, that's Tactical Combat Casualty Care, IFAC, that I keep in my trunk along with my Bob and get home bag. How often should items be replaced if they go through the heat and cold cycle of Canadian summers and winters? So, Alan?
About the only quasi-perishable item in that is going to be the lubricant for the NPA if you have one in your kit. Other than that, plan to replace anything adhesive about every 2 years. Medical tape, for example, does not do well after it's been in the cold. But beyond that, you should be all right. I mean, if you're buying, the name brand stuff from a reputable dealer, you're getting high quality equipment. It shouldn't be too badly affected by a little temperature shift.
Yeah, I think they mentioned about the tourniquets. If you buy the cheapies, they're more affected by temperature than the actual.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, absolutely. Because the material is less dense, and so there's more room for molecules to move around and stuff. But if you've got the good stuff, if you've got the good ones, the name brand stuff, which is what you should be using, spend the extra few bucks and do that. You shouldn't be affected by the weather too badly. I might suggest, instead of keeping that in your trunk, keep it somewhere accessible. In case you happen to be the person who needs it and you can't get out of your car for some reason. That's about the only suggestion I have to you, Evan. And thank you for the kind words about the great episode. I do hope that you left us a review or a rating.
And with that, I've pulled up the iTunes reviews now. We've got 28 5 stars now. We got that one little guy at 4 stars, and we've got that one star still. So
they ain't us.
What was that?
They hate us because they ain't us.
Yeah, hey, you know what? It just means we're doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we weren't doing something right, we wouldn't get any complaints. So I'll take the 1 star and the 4 star. It's all good.
That's right.
Good with that.
No new written reviews yet, though, but a couple of new star reviews. So we'll take it.
Cool. We had a couple of Facebook messages.
Yes. Yeah. So these
we're expanding. This is awesome.
Yeah, so these were left. I put up on the Facebook page before we go live. I just link out to the live feed. So these were added to the live feeds after they watched them or listened to the podcast. So we got one from Jeff saying, "I listened to your podcast last night. You mentioned about keeping some spare money in a separate account. It does no good if you can't access it. Power outage, no ATMs working. I keep a small amount of cash on around just in case." Great point. He's 100% right. I didn't touch on that. Didn't mention it. I just said that I keep money in a bank account. And yeah, if power's out, ain't going to help me.
Well,
I think absolutely true.
Yeah, keeping money in a spare account is good if you're trying to save money for either a preparedness item or if it's like a low level emergency. I'm just trying to think of something like you get kicked out of the house by the wife and you need a hotel for the night or whatever. Okay, so social services are still in place, but yeah, for the most part, if you want to have cash for emergencies, put it in a Ziploc bag, hide it in the bottom of your shoe or whatever, like wherever your personal preference is. Because cash is king, right? I mean,
I'll counter that by saying if you're dealing with a localized emergency and you happen to get separated from somebody else, you can't give them cash. But if they have an ATM card and an ATM is working somewhere that you're not, then they still have access to it. So.
Yeah, that's true.
I think there's something to be said for both systems.
Yes.
But, Jeff is absolutely right that having cash on hand is important.
Yeah, you can't even send somebody an EMT as a last minute thing for an emergency cash donation if you don't have cash in the bank, right? So.
Yep. Sure.
Absolutely.
We had another one here from Philip. Just started listening to the podcast and really need to ask you what you're using for your OPA. So this was in regards to the IFAC episode. Your description left me a little confused. Another reason I heard regarding some entities moving away from granular hemostatic agents was increased deburrment necessary following the initial application.
Oh, debridement, yeah.
Or debridement, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So debridement, for those who are not familiar, is the scrubbing out of a wound after in the hospital, which is absolutely correct. So let's just take that granular hemostatic agent and liken it to a Model T. Right. It was good in its time and it's lived its life, and now we have better technology. Get the impregnated hemostatic gauze. I think we've talked enough about both of those on the other episodes. So go back to the IFAC episode, which was 2 episodes ago, I think, and we go into that pretty deep. And you're absolutely right, Philip, that is another reason to steer away from it. If I have the choice of using a granular agent or nothing, I will use the granular agent, but if I'm preparing in advance to need this, then I'm going to make the choice to have the impregnated gauze on hand rather than the grains. In terms of OPAs, so we only kind of touched on OPAs. So an OPA is an oropharyngeal airway, which is the tube that goes from your lips to your pharynx. That is one it's a little bit more complicated than the NPA. So the NPA is the nasal airway. They're a little bit more forgiving in terms of size. So it goes kind of up the nostril and rotates through, as opposed to going through your mouth. Most people who do that carry an NPA instead of an OPA, just because, like I said, it is a little bit more forgiving. With an OPA, if you put the wrong size in, you can cram it in the wrong spot, or you can miss entirely if it's too short and it won't do any good. So rather than an OPA, which is a set of, I think, 9 or 10 different sizes, and I couldn't even tell you what the brand are on mine. They come in a clear package, and they're not stamped with a name on it or anything. I was actually on the Ragnarok website just before we came on here, and they've got the nasal airways. Those are the ones to use. It has a little tube of the lubricant with it, and when you check out, there's a discount code on there, which is Patriot 10. It'll get you 10% at checkout. But go with the nasal. The 28 French is kind of the standard size that fits the average smaller sized adult to larger sized adult, and it's more likely to be effective.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, like, the last time I actually saw what we just called an airway at the time was the oral airway. Was when I was doing my industrial first aid back in the 90s. I actually haven't seen one. Like I said, lower level first aid courses even being mentioned to use. So I mean, usually it's just tilting the net back and doing your best. But so it's more of a higher level first aid thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. Like it does take specialized training in in theory, and understanding how to use it correctly. So if you're in Ontario and you're taking a BLS or a first responder level course, then we can talk about airways, like we can talk about OPAs. They're a little bit easier to screw up. The nasal airway is pretty hard to mess around with. It only goes in the one way. And yeah, you can damage the septum. You can do a little bit of damage on the way through, but it's not a ton. Either way, I mean, it comes back to if you don't know how to use it, don't bother. Do it right, because that person's life probably depends on it. If it's important enough to you to have it, it's important enough to you to take a class and learn how to use it properly.
Yeah.
There you go.
Actually, before I forget, speaking of Ragnarok, I actually had the chance to meet Andrew face to face for the first time last week too. So I've been on that podcast as much as this podcast, and we never actually met face to face before. So it just happened we were both 6 blocks away from each other, and ended up having lunch. So it was fantastic. It's
nice.
Face to face. So that was pretty cool too. Yeah,
awesome.
I forgot to mention that in the other shoutouts.
Right, and we've got an email as well. I'll read out here. It's from NV35. And it says, hey guys, enjoyed the episode on lazy prepping. Definitely put it into perspective that it is easy to become overwhelmed if you try to do everything at once. Focusing on doing only one thing at a time and doing it right is the surefire way to success. Funny enough, when I started building my EDC and range IFACs, I was doing that without even realizing it. Excellent episode on IFACs too, by the way. I've told my friends to give it a listen, so appreciate that. So after listening to the episode, the first thing I did was take a spare jacket out of my secondary closet, as well as a toque, scarf, and light gloves out of the storage and put them in the car. It took me 5 minutes, and the clothes were gathering dust where they were to begin with, so it's a win-win. No having to remove items from a regular circulation of clothes was important. It's a good point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Actually, when I was at the farm fair, there's the A Company military surplus is right on the edge of the fairgrounds, and I've mentioned that place before as having the cheap Gore-Tex jackets. So they've still got some of the $25 Gore-Tex jackets, and then 100% wool toques for $5.
Wow.
So it's like, yeah, I'll take one of those. So
Stock up, yeah,
that was fantastic. Not just for the fireproof aspect, but wool stays warm even when it's wet, and around here that makes a difference too, right?
Yep.
So yeah, good stuff.
He goes on to say, I'll add one good step to take for lazy prepping is to find a clear space in your home for a stockpile. It can be easy to let spaces under your stairs or the corners of the basement become, and it's some French word he's tossed in here that
oubliette is the word.
Yeah.
There you go. So yeah, my French is not strong. So and then he translates it, says the French term loosely meaning a place you put things to forget. So clearing out a space for stockpile is the first step to building that stockpile. It'll also help you organize around the house. Great point as well.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the traveling prepper had me a little jealous there. I saw his setup there, and he actually had a room dedicated to setting up preparedness stuff. So he would actually have like a big clear space, bring in all the equipment he wanted to deal with, and then he was actually able to like organize it properly without any sort of cluttering or like losing where stuff went, and he just have a place to focus on doing that. It was fantastic.
Beautiful.
Goals.
Continues the email here. Next thing I'm going to tackle is water. I really like the idea of filling up water jugs to flush the toilet with. You never know if a major event or service interruption can leave you without water pressure, so having the means to flush a toilet can go a long way to keeping your home sanitary while you adapt and overcome. This brings me to a question. When stockpiling water, would you suggest getting large containers or flats as smaller bottles, or a combination of both? Consider that I have numerous reusable water bottles around the house.
I'd say both.
Both.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like just being able to hand a neighbor, friend, whatever, somebody else has a bottle of water to drink from, and then having a large container just to fill up a tub with, or like a toilet with. There's no sense in getting 50 water bottles to fill up the toilet for a flush.
Yep.
You might as well have the flat at Costco water, which costs about 10 cents a bottle, and then have the spare containers around the house, whether it be Home Depot buckets or whatever, just to flush the toilets with. There's definitely use for both.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. 100% agree.
Not in Fancy actually had an interesting thing on water storage on his YouTube channel. The fact that he was using liquid oxygen to keep it fresh. I mean, you can do it with bleach, you can do it with all sorts of stuff, but you want to make sure it stays oxygenated, relatively fresh. So if it's smaller bottle, it's easier to shake up and make fresh than it is to have a large bucket trying to make fresh drinking water with, right?
Good point as well.
That's a great email. Thanks so much, NV35. That's I love that feedback. I love listening to, love hearing what other people are doing as well.
Yeah, that's good. And just a reminder, if you've got something that you want to contribute to the show, you can flip an email into feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. And even if you want to join us on the panel one night, we welcome other people to come out and contribute to a show. So flip an email into feedback@prepperpodcast.ca, and we'll of course read the email out and maybe even get you on the panel if you want.
That'd be cool.
So with that,
you have to wear a t-shirt if you're going to do that. I just made
it's part of the official uniform.
Yeah, there's a mandatory buy-in. Yeah. So with that, I'll bring episode number 33 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please help us out. Take a few minutes and submit a review, even if it's a 1-star. We'll take it. It helps other people find us. Well, maybe not the 1-star, but the 5 stars do. You can also find us at prepperpodcast.ca and, of course, on Facebook.
We do record these shows live via StreamYard. If you want an early peek at the show, find us on YouTube. Search for the Canadian Prepper Podcast and click the notifications tab. That will give you alerts when we are going live. If you want to find me, you can get me directly on Instagram at PPSWO. All
right, you can reach Ian directly by emailing me at theislandretreat@gmail.com. You can also find me on Canadian Patriot Podcast, also available on iTunes and YouTube. There you'll find us exposing war government waste, scrolling off on the odd firearms-related banter, and generally drowning our sorrows at the diminishing freedoms we face as time goes on.
Hey, please check me out at
Chicago boy.
Check me out at rapidsurvival.com. You can get me there on the live chat. We'll buy in some prepper gear. You can also email me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Thanks for joining us, and you can tune in for the next episode. We're going to be turning the geek level up here and talking about internet and communications security.
Super nerds.
Yeah. Bring your beanies and your pocket protectors. It's going to be a good show. So until next time, be prepared, stay safe,
and keep learning.